My name is Carol Lee, and this is my story.
Hi, I'm Emily Field, and this is my story.
Hi, I'm Marissa Chang, and these are my stories.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Chung, and these are my stories.
My name is Anna Xu, and these are my stories.
Hi, my name is Gabby Lee, and these are my stories.
My name is Anna Boo Wallace, and these are my stories.
Yeah, so the place where I was born is Troy, Michigan. And so growing up, it was really interesting. I think it was only until college or in recent years where I realized that that city was actually a pretty well-off city. And I think it's interesting because growing up, I think it really shows how mindset really can play a big role in how you kind of see your life. Because growing up, all I heard growing up was like, we don't have enough, like it's not enough. And so I really grew up in this very lack-based mindset.
So I was born in Austin, Texas, and we lived on the east side of Austin. I lived north for like the first 3 months of my life, but I don't particularly remember those months very well. But living on the east side, like growing up, it was primarily like Latinx or African American folks. And even going to school, that was like primarily like the people I was exposed to growing up, which I think was really cool because I got to learn about like their different cultures in school because they would like, we would all get to talk about it on different discussion days. But one thing that I think all of my siblings talk about often when we're asked like about the community growing up was there was less exposure to like Asian Americans and our culture. So it was interesting going to middle school and high school where there was like more diversity and growing up there and like finally realizing like, oh, we're not like the only Asians in this like little bubble. Like there are more of us.
Gosh, where am I from? I am from Vietnam, and I was born there. I am actually an immigrant, and I moved here to the United States in April of 1975, towards the end of the Vietnam War. My father was a naval admiral, and he was able to get all of his family on board of a U.S. ship that he wanted to return to the Philippines, the naval base, the U.S. naval base in the Philippines. And that's how we left Vietnam.
I was born in Texas, near the Dallas suburban area of Irving. I don't remember too much. I was, just a few years old before we moved. I think it was just your typical Texas Dallas suburb. My parents owned their first home ever there. A red brick, brand new home, and my dad was working. My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
I was born in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada, and I just remember going to Banff a lot, so looking out the windows in my house, you would see the Rocky Mountains. And most of the community that I was with was my parents' Chinese immigrant church and private Christian school that they sent us to that was all white. So those were pretty much my two kind of growing up memories from when I was born, but I also moved a lot.
So I'm really international. I've lived in 5 different countries. So I was actually born in the Philippines, in Manila. And I lived there until I was about 2, and then my family moved to London. That's the earliest place I remember living. And that was short, like 6-month, 9-month stint. And then Singapore for 14 years. Then they moved to Australia, and then I came here, and they were back in Singapore. So citizenship-wise, I'm Singaporean, and that is where I consider like my place of like growing up because I was there like from 3 to 17.
I was born in Carrollton, Texas, but then I moved to Japan when I was 4 for my dad's job, and then I moved back when I was 6, and then I moved to McKinney, and I went to Allen ISD.
Growing up in Seattle, I was born there, and I was there until I was maybe 10 or so. In between there, I moved to Austin when my brother was born for a couple years or so. But in Seattle, I had a very, I would say, calm childhood. I was going to a Montessori school and I had a good group of friends, and it was definitely nice being near such amazing nature and just growing up in a city that is pretty different from Texas, I would say.
Even growing up in Wichita, Kansas, we were constantly, almost on a daily basis, receive racial slur, just really violent verbal threats, but nothing really physical. But that's basically how I grew up. And I had to defend myself constantly, have to justify why I'm there constantly. But even that, and despite all that, I made a lot of friends. I know who my safe people are, and I knew what I needed to do in order to get accepted. And so a lot of my personality, my outward personality, is just to increase my friendliness and tactics that I think would get me accepted. And I think that's just a response to what was happening around me.
So for me, like a lot of my friends were Asian Americans. And so for them, their upbringing was very similar, where they also didn't feel enough. So because all of my friends were feeling that way, it became like a normalized feeling. It was like, oh, this is just normal. Like we're not enough. Like we have to keep on working harder and doing more. And then we'll one day quote unquote, be enough. Right. And my sister, on the other hand, most of her friends were non-Asian. And so when she went over to their houses and hung out with their parents, she saw a drastic difference. And so growing up, she was very rebellious because I kind of almost like accepted like the fact that in my mind, it was a fact. I was like, oh yeah, I'm not enough. That's it. In my sister's mind, she's like, oh, like how come everyone else's parents is telling them that they're great, but all I'm hearing at home is that I'm not enough. And so it was really interesting to just realize over the years, like how much your surroundings can influence who you are.
I struggled more with creating a relationship with my mom compared to my dad. And I think the only reason that was just because I'm shyer and I'm more on the introverted side, and she's more on the extroverted side. So I think sometimes we would just like butt heads over that. But
my relationship with my mom was, I think growing up, when I think about it, it was both really warm, and I also have some scarier memories. Mm-hmm. So it would be where I would go to her when I was feeling scared, or I remember going to their bed to sleep in their bed. But it was also a pretty strict upbringing with I would attribute some of that probably to maybe partly culture and also the conservative Christian kind of bubble that my parents were in. So sometimes it would get a little scary too, in terms of like spanking, or I think some of the maybe unprocessed pain that my mom would have whenever we were trying to express our voices. Maybe because I imagined being the oldest female in her family, growing up in Hong Kong, knowing a little bit of the dynamics of her family, that she didn't have too much of a voice. Mm-hmm. So whenever we were trying to maybe just express our opinion, it would be seen as talking back.
I knew my mom loved me, but I also felt disconnected at the same time. And I think part of the reason why was, so like I said, my mom's really beautiful. She looked like her mom, and my aunt and her daughter, they all looked alike. And I apparently came out looking like my dad, to the point where the story is when I came out, I was born, my grandmother scolded my mom for not looking at enough photos of herself and looking at my dad because I didn't end up looking like that. I actually didn't think I was pretty like my mom, you know what I mean? So there was and then I was also kind of a tomboy, which was also another thing. So I feel like we always had a good relationship, but it was just always highlighted to me when I was a little girl that I didn't look like ironically, now that I'm older, people say I look like my mom. But when I was young, like literally they'd be like, oh yeah, she just had ugly duckling syndrome. Because everyone was just like, yeah, she's like ugly baby. Like I was just, I was just always told I was bigger than the typical Asian girl. And like, for one, I was like taller. My dad is just about 6 foot. My mom is 5'1". Wow. So I ended up like 5'4", which for females in Singapore is pretty tall, right? And then my bone structure and stuff, I'm just broader, right? And then I have curves, and my mom was like, it's great, but we don't know where it's coming. So it's just, I always felt bigger, right? Like even my shoe size, right? Here, 8.5, 9, average. Yeah. In Singapore, it's like ginormous. There were just all these different things growing up where I just like always felt a little out of place in typical Asian culture because there's just a lot of ways that I didn't fit.
Explicitly, I think a lot of expectations are ones that I've certainly challenged her over the years, which was a disconnect, especially earlier in life. I remember getting a lot of comments about weight, exercise, health, but it was always framed in, I guess, very self-critical ways. I think the one that sticks to me most was if I don't do something or I stop doing something, she threatened to send me to a weight loss camp. It was something pretty drastic like that. I remember that explicit moment just because it was really like a slap in the face. And then more generally speaking, there were a lot of moments of like, act like a lady, be more like a lady. Lady is the last thing most people I know would call me, especially when most of my best friends are guys on top of that. So it was very much, I remember like being rebellious in that sense, which it's hard to say whether I was naturally more masculine or if that pushed it along the way of being told to be more ladylike or expectations to dress certain ways for family occasions, those things.
Something that I wish my mom understood more about me. I also identify as queer, but I have only dated men, so that kind of sucks. But I guess just like understanding more about my sexuality and like being more open about it. Because I remember when I came out to her, I think that's the only time I've ever had like a panic attack or an anxiety attack, because I was scared and tiny. I was like 12 or 13. But my sexuality has like, the way I identify has changed, so.
Something that I've always wanted to hear my mom say, it's not really a specific thing, but just with my mom, when she's in a good mood, is very excitable and very energetic and very enthusiastic. And so that's when I tend to open up to her the most, because we have like such a fun, positive banter. And I think when she's not feeling that way is when I tend to, retreat back into my own space, because I think growing up, it's always been, the mother figure and not like a friend or an equal. I think we're trying to sort of transition more into that dynamic. And so when I'm not met with, a excitable response or a motherly kind of reaction, then it's kind of like, whoa, like I didn't know like you could have these feelings too. Like I didn't know moms could feel like sad or angry or things like that.
I just know to be a good girl back then is just to be quiet and to internalize a lot of my emotions. And that's exactly what I did. And in our culture, we're not really allowed to express our emotions. Sometimes it does come out, and then we get punished even more because it does come out. Sometimes you just can't bottle it in that much. But I've had brothers and sisters. There's about 5 of us in the family, and we share similar experiences. So I was able to express a lot of that with my brothers, my 3 younger brothers and my older sister. So there was a lot of therapy we gave each other, a lot of just listening to, very compassionate listening to, and also they're able to experience the same thing. And so we felt much closer because of that, because of that. Now that I'm older, as I go into my 40s and then my 50s, I'm much more braver now. I'm able to articulate to my mother where we differ without eliciting anger or even or negative emotion from her. I'm able to articulate, and now whether because she's growing more towards my direction or I'm understanding more of where she's from. I mean, I realize that in order to have a relationship with my mother, I have to understand where she's coming from and why those things were important to her. And that was hard because part of me just want to say, nope, I'm going to live in a different city in the United States and my parents are in a different city. I'm good with that. And maybe you go home once a year, and that's about, but I really want to start to understand, especially when I start to have my own kids and my own daughter. And I wanted to be careful that I don't carry generation trauma and transfer it to my daughter unconsciously and not aware that I'm actually doing that. So to look back at her generation and looking at where she's coming from, I realize why she placed so much importance in material things, in statuses. This is where she came from. And she's completely unaware that it's being passed on to her. And also growing up poor. So there's always a struggle to feed the family. There's a struggle to put food on the table. And then at the end of the war, she's lived her entire life in Vietnam in a war-torn country.
I always want to know more about her day. I would love to see how she goes about her day, through a camera or something. Cause I'll always give her a full rundown of my day. But then I know when I'm at school, she does work and she goes to pottery making sometimes. But I feel it'd be cool for a day to just follow her around and see her routine. Cause I don't get to see the first 7 hours of her day cause I'm at school. Yeah. And I feel I'd also like to see what she was like when she was younger. I need to ask her more about that.
My mom, I think her perfectionism shows up a lot in appearances, right? How your house is kept, how you are put together. Yeah. And sometimes I'm it would be nice to be just as you are. It's okay to show your flaws, kind of thing. She used to chase me around the house with lip gloss when I would go home because I am only looking like this because it's a video interview. Yeah. You know me, I'm usually t-shirt, leggings, no makeup. And my mother would be I'd be going out and she'd be the gloss brightens your face. And I'm
yeah, I think I'm probably still in process, of individuating. For me, I think what helped was honoring my mom's story and her part in my life. Seeing both the gifts and the challenges. And listening to just that inner compass, I feel as I'm, getting older and older, that there's just some things that I'm very clear I don't want to participate in, and there's some things I'm maybe not always very clear what I want to participate in, but there's certain things where I'm no, I don't really want to be a part of that, and just honoring that and following it, wondering what that's about. I think that's what's probably brought me to where I can see that individuation a little bit more clearly. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. I'm not very close with my grandmother. It's very surface level. For some extent, part of that is the language barrier because I don't speak Vietnamese since my parents raised me to be as American as possible. I never learned Vietnamese. And I'm trying to learn now, but it's difficult to say. It's a very tonal language. So it's a lot of time and practice, especially with listening and hearing it. And my grandmother, in turn, is not the best with English. And I naturally talk pretty fast. So it's hard sometimes to communicate. But also, for most of my life, she's not very motherly or grandmotherly, I guess. I remember one of the big I guess, cultural signifiers for me is with most families, especially in American culture, it's, oh, you go to grandma's house, she does your laundry, she gives you cookies, you get to like do these things. My dad's parents have long since passed, and so they're my mom's parents are my grandparents. And she feeds us, but it's never cookies. it's always healthy Vietnamese food. I think last time we went there for Christmas last year, I got a nice bowl of cucumber soup.
Oh.
Very bland cucumber soup. No cookies. Very much a businesswoman type person. And so it was very much about what is school like? What are your grades? And that's most of the connections with her that I've had.
So like now I remember I was like, you know what if I just send my mom a bunch of like self-development like videos like in Chinese, like, and just send it to her, and then all of her algorithm became that, and then she started learning about it. So I'm like, this is a hack for, you know, like parents. If you want your parents to do more development work, this is like a positive way. So she actually really loves it now. She even says more of it to me now. So I'm like, oh, very interesting.
This project was interesting for me because, like I said, I think the mother-daughter relationship is always very interesting, right? Like, I think it's where we're built up. It's also at the same place where you can get wounded the most, right? Because of things that your mom, I don't even think it's intentional a lot of times, right? Like, and so it's one of those things where, like, I know for me as an adult now, having to like now look at my mom and be like, you're just human, man. You're doing the best you can.
Hearing my friends and others tell me that I'm like my mom now, I take a lot of pride in, because I think now I think of my mom as like a really cool person. And so I think sometimes I even go out of my way to be more like my mom in some ways, kind of like just day by day, like, how would my mom do this? Or how would she react to this?
Other things I learned from her, and I'll be short, but she knows what she wants. I think for the most part, I'm kind of an indecisive person because if I take risks and I'm wrong, I don't like that. Whereas she's much more artsy, exploratory, creative. She really enjoys that process of collaboration and being a part of something bigger. Whereas I'm more just like, go, 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 like, let's do the thing, let's finish, let's be a little bit more task-oriented. And so she can be task-oriented too, but she's much more attuned to her surroundings and feeling-oriented. Yeah. She can pick up on, if she walks into a room, the vibe. I think we have a really healthy relationship. We talk on the phone. Well, we try to FaceTime her once a week. She shares her feelings and thoughts for the most part with us, I think. She's open with her experimentation, and or we catch it on Instagram and then we talk about it. So we try to be open about it, and again, accepting and understanding of where she's coming from versus being judgmental right away. Oh, what do I hope my relationship with Jocelyn looks like? As she gets older, she's becoming wiser and becoming an adult, and so then we'll be peers. You know, I mean, of course we'll still be mother-daughter, but she's starting to talk about networking and what she wants to do in her life, and I've got all these business ideas and business tactics when it comes to interviewing and resume that I can help her with, and so she does ask me for advice, which I love.
Favorite moment with my daughter is when they were about 18. And we sat down and I don't know how it happened. It wasn't planned. We just sat down one day, and I remember it very clearly in the living room. It was the evening after dinner, and they just came in and we started talking about our life together and what they have learned. And they started to tear up and started to tell me the things that I did or said that hurt or that's painful. And I was able to listen, I mean, deeply listen, and not listening to respond or to react or defend anything. I just listened. And I did see, I saw how painful it must have been, and I apologized to them. It was like that was the beginning of a very close, if there was any gaps in our relationship at that moment, it was completely sealed and healed for me personally. And since then, they can't stop talking to me.
And be open to hearing people's stories. I think there's a lot we can learn from recognizing it's okay for me to be angry that you did this, but it's also not solely your fault, because this was your trauma or the way you were raised. And trauma is a lot to work through.
I think we're both pretty honest with each other. She's very comfortable with telling me where she's at and how she feels. And sometimes I'm a little like, it takes me a little bit to be like, okay. But I really appreciate it. And I think, just trying to understand where she's coming from, because it's pretty rare that she'll say anything that's really hurtful. She will just be really honest with me. And I think that honesty allows both of us, and we usually will take some space, we need a little bit of space to process, and then to come back and reconnect and talk about it when we are both ready. That feels different, because I think for me growing up, it was like, we need to work it out right now, no matter what, whether people are ready or not, kind of a thing.
To food, and food has always been very associated with showing love in my family. And even with my mom and dad, they both have dishes that I associate with them. And when I'm craving something, I'll be like, hey mom, can you make this dish? Or hey dad, can you make this dish? So I feel like in that way I would want to pass down both all my favorite meals that I've grown up with, that both my grandparents and my parents have made me, but also just finding a dish that maybe I really like to cook or I really like to eat, and kind of passing that down. Kind of if my kids or something were having a bad day or something, they would have a dish in mind that they would that would kind of comfort them.
Something that does come up is I feel that I wish our generation had more compassion towards the older generation. And I think it's hard to have that if we don't understand where the parents came from. So I do think that is one of my wishes and why I like to do this work, because through healing ourselves, we also understand others. We also understand the older generation. We understand why people are the way they are. Doesn't mean that, like I said, doesn't mean that what they did was right or wrong or anything like that, but more so just create understanding and compassion. Because I think that ultimately is what unites people together. Versus, just always being oh, they did this, they did that, they're wrong, they shouldn't have done that. It's how can we create an understanding of why they did the things that they did, what compelled them to, and what is the deeper reason? And then seeing it from a compassionate lens, we're able to understand, and we can all collectively heal.
Oh, what do I hope my relationship with Jocelyn looks like? As she gets older, she's becoming wiser and becoming an adult. And so then we'll be peers, of course we'll still be mother-daughter, but she's starting to talk about networking and what she wants to do in her life. And I've got all these business ideas and business tactics when it comes to interviewing and resume that I can help her with. And so she does ask me for advice, which I love. And then she helps me with my fashion, so I typically inherit her stuff nowadays.
Oh, cute.
And ask for her makeup.
Oh, that's beautiful.